You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
A wizard. Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain when you were angry or scared?
Hello YouTube and welcome to another episode of Warframe Science. Today I am super excited to teach you about Limbo.
You serious?
Limbo used to be maligned and ostracized by our community for having 4 abilities that did basically the same thing. Then he got reworked. Now he only has 3 abilities that do the same thing, and a 4th ability that stops time, which is bullshit. We'll get to that later. First, I want to discuss Limbo's uncanny abilities that push himself, his enemies, and the entire building around them out into some alternate dimension called the Rift Plane. Okay, so what the heck is an alternate dimension? Science fiction likes to throw around terms like alternate dimensions and parallel universes just to justify having their actors dress up in different weird clothing and act funny but still be able to use the same sets. Oh no, he has a mustache! If you asked a scientist how an alternate dimension works, they would explain it something like this. You and I experience the universe in 4 dimensions right now. 3 dimensions of space, that would be forward and backward, left and right, up and down, and then 1 dimension of time. Now the essential idea of an alternate dimension is that there might be more than just those 4 axes on which you could measure the location or the motion of an object. For example, there could be an extra 5th spatial dimension that we don't see, but that would provide you a direction in which you could take a step while remaining in exactly the same place in the 3D world that we know and love. Now, if we go ahead and assume that such a 5th dimension does exist, and let's just go ahead and call that direction riftwards instead of forwards or upwards, then we now have the idea behind Limbo's rift plane. All Limbo has to do is step a meter riftwards, and all of a sudden bullets and swords and whatnot are going to miss him by a full meter because the entire 3-dimensional area through which they're passing is a meter away from where Limbo is currently located. Then Limbo can step a meter anti-riftwards and be back to normal. Now, I would love to declare that all this stuff has no scientific basis and that there's no evidence whatsoever that alternate dimensions could possibly exist. Unfortunately, string theory is a thing. I'll let Jim Parsons explain.
String theory posits that the fundamental particles we see in 3 dimensions are actually strings embedded in multidimensional space-time.
Interesting. So that would mean that...
Can't do this by myself, buddy.
So it's sort of like a guitar string, but instead of making an actual sound, each vibration is a different particle.
Precisely. And when you express it in 11 dimensions, Einstein's relativity equations pop out. Does that sound like a coincidence?
It does not.
Yep. That's what I think.
Most versions of string theory have their strings vibrate in 6 or 7 extra spatial dimensions. But the same theories that suggest that extra dimensions exist also explain why you and I can't see those extra dimensions and why Limbo would never be able to walk around in them. We know that space can curve from Einstein's general relativity. That's how gravity works. Now, a huge part of string theory is the explanation of how all those extra dimensions can be curled up into a tiny ball so that they don't take up more space than a subatomic particle. A common way to wrap your head around how this works is to picture a garden hose. Now, if you hold a garden hose in your hands, it's obviously a 3-dimensional object. It's been made of a thick piece of material that's wrapped around into a cylinder, and it's got length and circumference and diameter and everything. However, if you look at a garden hose from a long ways away, say a kilometer, then it'll appear to just be a single-dimensional line. String theory suggests that these extra spatial dimensions are wrapped up in a similar way, although instead of being a cylindrical garden hose with a diameter of a few centimeters, it's a Calabi-Yau manifold with a diameter of a few femtometers. There are something like 10 to the 500th power different manifolds that are mathematically possible, each of which would have different ramifications on the way the universe works, which is part of why people get the idea that parallel universes are a thing. But that's beside the point. The point is, Limbo would have to shove each individual atom in his body through a manifold like that to be able to walk any distance in an alternate dimension. Could he do it? Maybe? I'm at a loss to explain how he could do it without turning himself into so much radioactive slop. I'm inclined to think that it's all just completely impossible. And besides, there's some inconsistencies within Limbo's kit that lead me to think that it's all just science fiction and not science. After all, if Limbo can step far enough into the rift that he can no longer touch bullets, then he should also no longer be able to touch the ground he was standing on, or the air that he was breathing, or the sound that was reaching his ears, or the light that was reaching his eyes. In fact, it would be just like standing in outer space, in complete darkness.
Guess who?
It's you.
It's me! Goodbye!
Ah yes, and now it's time to discuss Stasis, Limbo's newest ability, where he freezes time within the rift. Well, okay, full disclosure, nowhere does it actually specify that freezing time is what Limbo is doing.
Stasis halts the movement of enemies and gunfire inside the rift.
But Rhino already has the ability to stomp time into oblivion, so for a well-educated science wizard like Limbo that can step into alternate dimensions, it should be a piece of cake to stop time, right? Well, maybe not so much. In order to explain this, I'm going to have to teach you general relativity, in the broadest strokes possible. So the core idea is that anybody in the universe will measure the speed of light as a constant, regardless of what conditions they're under, and that space and time can warp to make this happen, even when our observer happens to be moving at a very high velocity, or is being accelerated by a gravitational field. And because of this, according to Einstein, it's actually a very simple task to slow down time. All you have to do is move very quickly or generate an extremely strong gravitational field. Unfortunately for Limbo, neither of these strategies will allow him to generate a time-stopping stasis field. For enemies to be slowed down by even 50%, they would have to be moving at a speed of 87% of the speed of light with respect to Limbo. And for enemies to be stopped in time entirely, they would have to be moving at, you guessed it, light speed, which breaks the universe. Seriously. Like, we're talking about the kind of impossible that generates the next Big Bang. And it's all a moot point anyways, because the enemies that are affected by stasis obviously aren't moving at all, much less at the speed of light. Alternatively, Limbo could use gravity to stop time for his enemies by shoving all of them across the event horizon of a black hole, which could in principle be accomplished with the Simulator. If the Simulator actually worked. Unfortunately, the Simulator would have to spit out more mass than the Chandrasekhar limit for it to have any chance at collapsing into a black hole, which means that Limbo would need to carry around several inconveniently large neutron stars as its ammunition. The best conclusion we can draw is that Limbo's abilities are more science fiction than science. According to string theory, there may be alternate dimensions, but Limbo will never be able to walk into them. And according to general relativity, you can slow down or stop time, but Limbo would never be able to do so as a restraint to his enemies. If you like this episode, then be sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions about the science, or if you have any ideas for Warframes I should talk about in future episodes, then be sure to let me know in the comment section below. This episode was going to be about Saren, but then she got reworked, and I had to throw away all my research. By the way, did I mention Saren's made out of mushrooms? She's made out of mushrooms.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Oh no, he has a mustache.